everyone. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach and author of the fantastic little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co-authors in the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. And now I'm adding even more books to my collection. I'm going to be the lead author in a book that's coming out in October called Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. And I'm sure that's going to be a bestseller too, because I'm working with some amazing people in conjunction with Laura DeFranco and her Brave Healer Productions publication company. Anyway, enough of that. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. This is episode 248, and today our topic title is Happy Spiritual Independence Day. Well, as real Independence Day approaches in the United States, especially in this time of global chaos and confusion, our thoughts naturally turn to the concepts of liberation, independence, freedom, and emancipation. These ideas seem to show up most frequently in social, legal, and political contexts, but what about their relevance in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives? In fact, if you're like me, you might ask yourself, how do I see my spirit in this world at this time? It's a significant question, and one which we should all contemplate on a regular basis, but certainly when Independence Day concepts are in our awareness. These ideas have profound significance in the realm of spirituality. They are deeply intertwined with our true spiritual nature, guiding us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe. For this episode of Life Mastery TV, I've invited back my good friend and colleague, Reiki Master Scott Holmes, to help me adopt a more spiritual perspective for the upcoming Independence Day celebrations. Our focus in this conversation will be different perspectives on independence, with emphasis on their impact in our spiritual lives. So please welcome Scott to the program. Welcome, Scott. Thanks for joining me again on Life Mastery TV, especially on such short notice. How are you doing?
Doing absolutely wonderful. I wanted to say Happy Independence Day to everybody out there. One of my favorite holidays, simply because it's all about celebration, family. People travel. This year, by the way, they said that there were going to be more travelers this weekend than at any other point, other than Christmas. So,
right, yeah,
people are really. It's become a real true holiday, or at least a celebration. It doesn't hurt that it's a 4-day weekend either.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now, nobody objects to a 4-day weekend, I'm sure. Although I suppose there are still many people who work on those days, who put themselves into the place of, keeping us safe and being first responders for emergencies that might happen. I mean, those guys, the police, the firemen, the nurses and doctors, they just never go off duty. And
No,
so
they
I'm
don't.
really grateful that they're out there, watching out for us.
And they had such a microscope on them through COVID, when they didn't have a choice really about going to work or not going to work. They were going, and they were celebrated in such a great manner. And I want to continue, much like yourself, to celebrate those people who do that work. I don't know that I could do it, and I'm thankful that they can.
Right. Well, I was put in mind by a friend of mine the other day who talked about, if any kind of an emergency develops, it doesn't matter whether you are a trained doctor or a fireman or a policeman or law enforcement or anything like that. When, as they say, when the shit hits the fan, if you have just enough strength to maybe make sure that your neighbors have some water and some food, or some other thing, you take care of somebody's pet, just those little bits and pieces alone contribute to the overall improvement of our society. So, and I think this is an important point, because we tend to get down on ourselves, thinking we don't do enough. I don't do enough. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Especially when we compare ourselves to certain other people in different contexts. But the truth is, each of us has immense value. value far beyond what we give ourselves credit for. And that's part of what we're really celebrating here today, I think.
So you're absolutely right. That brings to mind, by the way, every day I try to do at least one thing. Just I don't even want to sometimes people to know about it, but do one thing for the person. I've paid for coffee for the person behind me. I've, just small little things, each and every day that maybe turns somebody's world around a little bit, gives them a little bit of hope that not everybody's bad, not everything in their life is bad, and
Right.
it's those small things. There was a woman, she's struggling, and she's counting out pennies in line in front of me because she didn't quite have enough money, and I gave the cashier $1, and the cashier said, "Ma'am, I got it." And he went to give me the change, and I said, "No, you give that to her."
Mm-hmm.
And she just had this biggest, brightest smile. She didn't speak English, and she had the biggest smile on her face, and I just said, "Thank you, thank you."
Yeah.
And it's that small little things that we do that come from the heart through compassion that changes everything and lifts everyone up.
Right. And even something as simple as holding the door for somebody. It doesn't have to be someone of the opposite sex. I could hold a door for you, Scott. Hey, go ahead, man. It doesn't. It's just a gesture of goodwill. That's what it is. It's not saying I'm better than you and I have strength. I can open a door because you've got no arms or no legs or some silly thing like that. Although if you had no arms and no legs, it probably would be appropriate for me to help
open
out.
the door, right?
But
I agree with you. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings to mind. Do you recall, for those of you old enough, do you recall the weeks after 9/11? The courtesy, the compassion that everyone showed for everybody else was amazing to me. It showed what life could be if we all just took a step back and just, no, really, I don't need to get ahead of you. I'm not going to fight you. You go in line, go ahead. People were courteous. They would look each other in the eye, and I'm proud to be in this country. The fatalities in New York, the horror of what went on, weren't going to crush us, and we were going to do everything we could to make sure that our neighbor was safe, that everything we were looking out for one another. And when you see natural disasters, whether it be New Orleans or hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever, you see neighbors taking care of neighbors. You see just somebody has a boat, so they go and they save, pull people out of homes because of the flooding, or there are all of these things that happen. But I think that's the innate nature of who we are is we don't need to get ahead that badly that we're going to hurt somebody. We want to be able to live in a civil society where those things matter.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think about it, in all of the situations that you described, I think what's really happening here is we become aware of the fact that, hey, wait a minute, this is another human being, or it doesn't even have to be a human being, another creature, another wonderful expression of infinite consciousness in some kind of trouble, and I am available to provide some assistance. When I'm thinking that way, when I'm in that level of awareness, I think what I also notice in my mind is that it's my ego mind is getting out of the way and my spirit is starting to come back to the forefront. And to me, that's what real spiritual independence is all about. It's about allowing my soul, my true essence, my true beingness to shine through and to become the beacon within whatever small context I'm involved in. To me, that's what that really is all about.
Oh, absolutely. I've been accused, by the way, by family members and my wife, God bless her when she was alive, that I always had rose-colored glasses on. And the reason they would say that was because no matter what happened, I always could see that it wasn't the most tragic thing in the world, that there was positives that came out of those things. And it reminds me of the story of the farmer and his son finds a horse, and he said, well, the neighbor said, that's wonderful, you found a horse. He said, maybe. So the next day, his son is riding the horse, he falls and he breaks his leg. And this neighbor say, oh my God, that is terrible. That is so terrible. It's so tragic. And he says, well, maybe. The next day they come and they conscript all of the men of age into the army. And they don't take his son because his leg is broken. So we never know how our circumstances and how it plays out. And so just allowing what comes and being okay with it.
Right. Yeah. We never know
but getting to that point.
Yeah. We never know what exactly our circumstances are going to create for us. And in fact, we often, it requires a certain amount of introspection to look back on something and say, wow, if that hadn't happened, then all of these other things wouldn't have shown up in my life, you know? And that requires, again, a certain amount of, first of all, awareness of what's going on in life. And then some acceptance of all that is, rather than allowing ourselves to get caught up in all of the negativity and, so forth that goes on in the world. When you talk about this idea of the rose-colored glasses, well, to me, that's just another expression for being an optimist. Although it's got a bit of a sideways
it has that little bit
compliment
of
to
twist,
it.
yes.
Yeah. But my point is that, I've heard it said there, all the pessimists of the world say, oh, it just can't get any worse. And all the optimists of the world say, oh, yes, it can. It's a good joke, but it makes sense. If you just wait for it, something else is going to happen. And in your mind, it might be worse. Right. But I think what you're pointing out is that if we can just simply be with what is, just be present with it and not make up any story or attach any particular value system to it, then we can come into a place of acceptance. Now, acceptance doesn't mean that I necessarily want it to continue going on the way it is. But if I don't accept it as it is right now, then there is no way that I can have any control over changing it. You have to accept what is as part of your process and be able to say, all right, I accept it. This is what's shown up for me. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to be with that? What am I in relationship to that? Those are the questions that we ought to be asking. And that is another major aspect of this idea of spiritual independence. I'm allowing my spirit to rise up in its awareness and to share its internal wisdom with me.
Liberating yourself from all of the would, shoulds, coulds, the programming that we've had inputted, however much or however little you've had in your life, and being able to say beyond that for me, I was the oldest, so I always had the shoulds, right? The expectations were from my parents that, I would be at that high level, and I would always show the example to my two sisters and my brother. And I was always behave the best, and I would always behave with respect, and I would always do that. And my dad, being in the military, of course, reinforced that. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. All the way down the line.
Yeah.
And I didn't always want to do that. There were parts of me that at times would try to buck the trend, that would try to go outside the rules. And my parents told me later in life, as a grown adult, that I was the only one that they worried about, because didn't always want to follow their rules. I didn't always want to do things as they thought I should. I wanted to find my own path. And so there was always that bumping of heads.
Bumping of
So,
heads is a good thing.
oh, I agree.
Yeah, think about certain animals like goats and rams, and they bump heads all the time. And it's not like they're trying to kill each other. Well, maybe on some level they are, but it's really about establishing their pecking order. And on day one, this guy might end up being in charge. He might win out and be like the numero uno for that day. On day two, things might shift. But the butting heads part, I think, just really means that you have a desire that's coming up within, probably a very strong desire, and you're trying to what's the word I want to say here? Assert that desire, and you're coming up against someone else who has a different desire that seems to be opposed to your desire. Now, when in the case of a parent and a child, it's usually the parent says, "No, you're going to do things my way because I'm a parent, I'm in charge, and you're supposed to listen to me."
Because
right?
I said so, right?
Yeah, right. Because I said so. And as one of my mom's favorite sayings, I don't know if she actually ever said this, but that's how it landed on me. Don't do as I do as I say. That's the way parents are. And I know I've done some of this with my own kids,
Oh, yeah.
I tried to avoid saying the things that in my mind seemed hypocritical when I heard them from my mom, but that doesn't mean I didn't do it. Sometimes my ego mind took over, and I had to be right.
Exactly.
And that's really one of the features of the ego mind. It's always got to be right because it's got to be in control. And so if we can learn to quiet the ego mind and just stay in a place of presence and spirit, then we liberate ourselves from all kinds of problems that we might otherwise be experiencing.
When I'm sure you did the same thing with your mom and dad. You're before you go out in your life, you say, "I will never say that to my children. I will never say that." And then your kids are pushing your buttons, and you haven't had really a whole lot of sleep, and you're hungry, and you just snap, and your parent comes right out of your mouth,
All right.
and you just stop and you go, "I can't believe that came out of my mouth." It's because when we get down to that kind of level, our base level, that comes out. Our programming comes out. Those words come out. Those thoughts come out. And here I think is one of the most important things is we have to. I didn't and couldn't get beyond this, and until my life evened out, until I had a really strong home life, until after passing of my daughter, my passing of my wife, and until I found myself again, I couldn't really elevate. I could not elevate, and I could not. It wasn't until I was really had both feet on the ground that I could start to liberate myself from my past thinking, to accept I made mistakes, did the best I could with what I had at the time.
Yeah.
But regrets went away.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that happened, I started to forgive myself of those things. And then the emotion and those traumas that would come up, that would say, "Hey, you're no good. You didn't do any good. You remember back here, you should have done this." Those didn't come up anymore. And if they did, they did not carry the same weight. And so as those things lifted, I started to lift. And I started, instead of hearing the ego mind, I started finding myself in my heart space, in that realm of compassion. And I had to forgive myself first before I could bring it out into the world, because you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
That
That's a good
liberate
point.
and that liberation for me was immense. It meant
Right.
that I didn't have to worry about home. I didn't have to worry about caregiving. I didn't have to worry about all of those things. I could just start to be me and not play the role, but I could start to play me. I've often said that I am now living my best 18-year-old life
Yeah, it's very
because
good.
because back then, before I got married, I'm in high school. I wanted to teach, I wanted to write, I wanted to travel, and I'm doing all of those things now.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
I'm truly living my best 18-year-old life because, and I feel amazing. At 66 years old, I feel amazing because of where I am spiritually, but the essence that because of the writing. By the way, anyone who wants to read an amazing book, Gifts of Wisdom, that is coming out in October. I am one of those authors. I have read some of the pieces, and it is absolutely worthwhile. It's nuggets that I wish I heard when I was 30, not when I was 60, but when I was 30. It would make a difference.
Right.
Sorry for the ad, but I'm
No,
really
hey,
excited.
that's great. Well, I want to mention that Ricky is here as well. Welcome, Ricky. Glad you could be able here to join us. Ricky is also one of the co-authors on that book. So all three of us here are going to be participating in that. And yes, Gifts of Wisdom. October 7th is our official launch date. You'll be hearing more over the next few months and weeks, I guess. And I'm very excited about it. We got lots of things planned with that book. You know, you were talking, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge Ricky made a comment about, she said, I heard that from my father as a kid and I hated it. It was super frustrating. I'm not sure exactly what she's referring to when she says, I heard that. She might have been talking about my statement, don't do as I do, do as I say. Or she might have been talking about one of Scott's statements. I don't know. But in any event, it's good to know that I'm not the only one who heard that. It's good to know that we are all on this journey together. All of us, we're all, the three of us here on this show right now are all part of the same approximate age group. The thing is, we all have to go through our own form of, I like to call it the hero's journey. I don't think we have to, but we seem to choose to. Most of us do. Where we start off in life, we have things are going, fairly well, let's say. And then we have some kind of a nosedive that takes us down into a deep pit of despair. It doesn't have to be like a super traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be a catastrophe, but something happens that brings us down energetically into the deepest pit for ourselves. Like some people call it the dark night of the soul. They have other names for it as well. And while we're there, people who aren't able to find their way out sometimes will end up becoming alcoholic, do other drugs. They'll do things like that to try and compensate for that. Some people will even commit suicide, I'm sad to say. And I know in my own case, when I got to that stage, suicide was on my mind. But thank God I had three kids out there that reminded me, the memory of my three kids reminded me, no, that's absolutely out of the question. That's not an option. And so the thing is, if you follow that trajectory, what happens is that pit of despair turns out to be one of your most most powerful teaching moments, because it brings you to the brink of truth about who you really are. And as you begin to embrace the truth of who you are, this is my experience anyway, I shouldn't speak in you statements. What happens is I start to realize, I have not been living authentically. I have been living according to someone else's rules and regulations. I have been trapped in this box, this boundary that was wrapped around me. I wasn't really trapped. It was a choice I made. I allowed myself to be in that place. Of course, at the time when all this is going on in my mind, I'm just blaming everybody else for putting me in this box, right? It's their fault, not mine. And so, it's really, really important as part of coming out and becoming aware and learning to embrace, embody, and empower yourself going forward, that you have to come back to reality and say, you know, I blamed my mother for this. I blamed my father for this. So first, I have to forgive them. I have to say, I know that you weren't really doing anything to harm me. You were just doing things that you thought were right to give me the right kind of life. I have to come to that place of forgiveness. And as you said, I have to forgive myself. And what I found from personally, I found it easier to have compassion for others and to forgive others than it was to have compassion for myself and to forgive myself. Some people have the reverse situation, but that's the way it was for me. You know, once I learned the power of compassion and forgiveness, and I started to apply it to myself, that is when true liberation, freedom, independence, emancipation started happening. Forgiveness is ultimately the great emancipator. Because when I forgive my mom and my dad, I'm not really, they don't really care, especially if they're already died. And I'm forgiving them after they have died. Well, they don't know, but I know. And what I have done by doing that is I've released myself from all those thoughts of blame and shame and trying to get even, trying to get justice, trying to get revenge, or whatever you want to call it. When I forgive, those thoughts go away. And as soon as those thoughts go away, then I can begin to see the other person as another beautiful, amazing spiritual being of light and love. And that is where really true freedom comes from, in my mind.
Wow. Okay. So if I said ditto, it probably wouldn't do it justice. But hero's journey, I think we every great novel, every great book that I've ever read is that hero's journey. It is, we all write our own. So because life is up and down. We all hit those points in our life, no matter how big or small, where things aren't great. There was a point in my life where my wife said, I don't want you to go to work today. And I said, why? She says, I don't know if you're coming home. I was at that point in my life where I just was completely empty and didn't know. And I thank God I had people in my life that said, hey, get some help before it gets any worse. And that's why I have compassion for those with those thoughts at that very moment, because it is real. It's the box they believe they're in. It's that those constructs that they can't live in that box, and so therefore they're a disappointment. They are a failure. They are less than. They don't deserve this life. And as you come out of that, you realize, oh my God, I can make this life whatever I want. Right. You've talked about your journey where you moved to California because that's the place you ought to be. Sorry, Beverly Hillbillies connotation. But it's because you came out of the box. You decided that there was a different spot for you. There was a different way of life. And my dad, who was the biggest, really, he said to me, I've been doing things the same way for 65 years. Why do I need to change?
Exactly.
And that in his mind, he didn't change. Here's the thing. The world changed dramatically since he was 20 years old. He was 85 and things had changed dramatically. He did things differently, but it was a very slow process to change. What he meant was he wasn't going to change things, take 2 steps to the left or 2 steps to the right, because he didn't have the capacity to do that.
Right.
When we talk about the spiritual end of it, it's those quantum leaps that we can make. It's like exercising. You exercise, you can maybe do 2 push-ups. And then if you do that continually, then you go to 10. And then when you do that every day you go to 20 and 40 push-ups, and all of a sudden someone says, can you do push-ups? Yes. You say, go down and do 100, jump back up. Well, the same way with in this life that we have spiritually, if you practice it, you can make those jumps, you can make those changes in your life much easier, going toward what you want.
Right.
What a liberating feeling, my gosh. You know, I for lack of a better word, I was poor most of my life because I didn't understand what abundance was. I always struggled with money up until the last 15 years because my mindset changed about what abundance was, and that I was even worth having value, that my value was there. And
Right.
how liberating is it to not have to worry about paying your bills, not looking at every penny and every dollar because you want to make sure that you can pay the bills at the end of the month. What a liberating feeling that is not worrying about it. You work your ass off to try and get to the point where you're okay. You are independent and financially. But the same thing can be said about that within yourself, that you work hard at it. Now, it's a different kind of work, granted. It's meditation, it's yoga, it's exercise, it's eating right, it's talking continuously, it's connecting with people. In our case, it's writing. My writing has been cathartic each and every time. It is. I go into a. I was talking with a fellow writer the other day about this, and for 10 days when we have that deadline, right? For 10 days, I am not a great person to be around because I am so involved in that. I am in there just playing with every emotion, every understanding. I'm trying to wring every single emotion that I can out of that to be able to bring writing to life.
Yeah.
And it's, why are all the great writers and artists historically, alcoholics, and they lead the most tempestuous lives? Because it churns. True writing really churns at who you are. But when you see that product and you can show people and you can say, hey, this is a part of me, that is just so exhilarating when people can see it, view it, feel it, and accept it.
Right.
Even if
Well, I
they might
think,
not agree. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, Ricky is empathizing with you. She said, I was the epitome of anxiety for 5 days before my chapter was completed. Now it's relief and excitement. Well, I was going to say, Scott, first of the couple things. In relation to your father, who said, I've been doing things all my life this way, I don't need to change. He's absolutely right. Nobody needs to change. You don't have to do anything. You can continue doing your life the way you're doing your life. If that works for you, that's great. My only question is, are you doing this authentically? Is this the real you doing it? Or are you doing it to please somebody else? That's the only question that I would ask you. And if you're doing it just to please somebody else, how is that serving you? How is that serving you to be all that you can be in this life? You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to do any of that stuff. But if you're not being truly authentic with yourself, being true to yourself, then are you really truly being fulfilled? That's the question. So it's an opportunity. It's a choice, but not a requirement. And that's a very important thing for people to understand. This idea of spiritual liberation is something that we can choose or not, depending on what we want, to have in our lives. The second thing I wanted to say is you talked about writing and how, you were mentioning how so many writers and artists have such tumultuous lives. And I think that's true. Many of them do. I'm not sure that the writing is what caused the tumult or whatever it is in their lives. It may have been the other way around. The tumult was what led to the writing. And I honestly don't believe that it has to be that way. I know in my case, my writing, the very first time I tried to write my story out, it was challenging. It was very cathartic, as you described it. But now, as I do it more and more, and I find different ways of saying different pieces or find other little details that I forgot about in previous renditions, I'm now finding each time I do it, I even feel more free than I did before. It's a greater sense of freedom with each iteration. And all of those, I mean, I would not want to go back in time and reverse things to the way they were before. Absolutely not. And I'm not going to say that I would necessarily want to live through those kinds of experiences again. On the other hand, I am very grateful for all of those experiences because I would not be able to enjoy the kind of freedom and well, joy that I have in my life right now. Otherwise, it might not. I mean, maybe I could come to a place of being totally joyful and happy all the time without having gone through all that stuff. And I'm sure some people do that. So I'm just saying that every one of us has a different path. Every one of us is going to have different experiences, and we're just here describing what we have gone through and suggesting that I believe everyone can have the kind of liberation, freedom, independence, and emancipation that I have. And it's just a choice to get there. And I can show you how I did it. Scott can show you how he did it. And your path might involve some of that, and it might be completely different. That's the thing for all of us to be aware of.
You would talk to a couple of points. Gratitude. When I was at my lowest, the one tool that stuck with me was finding gratitude. I walked into a Al-Anon meeting because it was suggested to me by a counselor. And the very first meeting we had was, they said, well, we're going to go over the fourth step. Name 3 things that you're grateful for. And at that point in my life, I could not name 3 things. I literally could not, that I was truly grateful for at that point in my life. And I learned how to wake up in the morning, and if nothing else, be grateful for waking up and the opportunity for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that really led me and got me out of that dark place. But the gratitude and being thankful. In order to be thankful, you have to be present. You have to be present in your life. You have to be here in your life. And gratitude for me was so important. And as we were talking about our parents, we have the ability to look for fulfillment spiritually now. And I wonder, my parents worked very, very hard all their life, and they did not have the ability to look up from their labors necessarily to look for fulfillment like you and I have these journeys we've been on to find the greater good, our greater selves, that level within us that allows us to expand like that. And I wonder if they had those opportunities, what they would do with it. Would they be different people than what we knew?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we may not know the answer. Although, each of us has the ability, I think, to communicate spiritually with our parents or anybody else who has passed from this life, because we're all one. That's just a fact. It's not just a bumper sticker. And I know this because I've had the personal, visceral experience of this, which I share in my book. So you'll have to read Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment, if you want to understand that story. But anyway, yeah, I do agree that we just don't know what the journey of other people is involved. And externally, from our perspective, it may appear that our parents weren't necessarily all that fulfilled. But maybe in some way they were fulfilled in ways that we don't know about, that maybe defies our external appreciation of it. You know what I'm saying? So we
Yeah.
don't know for sure what the person's journey was. Maybe they did exactly what they were supposed to be doing on their journey. I don't know. I can't say. And I won't know until I'm actually in the presence of those people again, and we're, sitting around a big dinner in the spirit world. And or I guess we don't need dinner, but we'll be sitting around anyway. Anyway, so I wanted to bring up another point. Ricky mentioned about perhaps it's fear of success that stymies people into a place that might feel okay, but not really comfortable, and they don't feel safe stepping out of the box. Or maybe it's censorship or criticism from others. This is something that I have really been thinking a lot about. I mean, censorship. First of all, do I censor myself? Absolutely. There are certain things that I won't say on this program because I don't want to create any kind of a polarizing scenario for people to deal with. I have my beliefs, you have your beliefs, and I don't want to create any kind of a discord. So yeah, I will censor myself in some cases. But what about criticism? This is another interesting question. Think about this for a moment. How often do you actually criticize somebody else? How often are you sitting there just picking apart what somebody else is doing? I bet you it's pretty rare. I'll bet you it's not that often. And yet, we all seem to have that same fear of being criticized, fear of being judged, fear of having someone else point the finger of blame at us. We have that fear, right? Where does that come from? And why do we have it? I mean, when I think about my own behavior, yeah, sure, sometimes I have judgments about people. Sometimes I have, critical thoughts. But that's not what's mostly going on for me. So when I see you, Scott, the first thing that comes to my mind is not some kind of criticism. It's instead, for me, it's more like, oh, wow, there's Scott. I really like to go give him a big hug. That's what comes up for me. Well, why can't we believe that other people have the same reaction toward us? That's the question that I want people to think about. And the truth of the matter is, other people have their own concerns and their own worries. They're probably not even thinking about you all that much, to be honest. So it's something for us all to think about. We can liberate ourselves when we realize that most of the criticism, judgment, negativity that we have, that we believe exists about ourselves, is self-generated. It all comes from up here in the ego mind. And the ego mind is a bizarre creature. Its purpose, it's a fear-based thing, meaning that it's designed to protect itself. And in protecting itself, it's trying to protect you, keep you safe. So it gets you to not do things that it thinks are risky or dangerous. Of course, the things that it thinks are risky or dangerous are probably not that risky or dangerous to begin with. So 95% of what the ego mind tells you is a lie. It's an illusion. It's a fake fear. And so if you can wake up to that and become aware of that, guess how much liberation you get from that? Allowing your spirit then to really stand up and shine and be the captain of your ship.
Wow, that was a lot. Thank you. We were going through when I was going through counseling. I had what kept coming up was the judge within me, and would come up and proclaim what was right, what was wrong, for me. And I
You can see
truly
the hammer
believe,
coming down.
oh yeah, constantly. Not good enough. No, bang. No, did that wrong. Bang. And the judge would sit up there, and it wasn't about other people. I judged me much harsher than I ever judged anyone else.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
One of the I don't know if you've ever driven in Massachusetts, but I am a certified masshole, and driving here is a blood sport, and so
You're right.
no one can drive as well as everyone else is doing the wrong thing, of course. And I was working with a yogini, and she said, I want you to suspend all judgment. I said, what do you mean? She says, every time you go to judge somebody, I want you to write it down, or when it comes up. And what she was doing was making me very, very conscious of that wheel that's been, oh, she shouldn't dress like that. Oh, why does he look like that? Why did they do that? The judgment of other people and other people's actions. You don't know what's going on. As you've said so many times before, you don't know what their journey is. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they're going. You don't know what's going on. You're out of it. It's their journey. Leave them alone. And so the judgment went away. And after about 3 days of writing these things down, it became less. And all of a sudden, I just sat back and was like, who am I to judge anything? And
Right.
It changed how I viewed myself, that lack of judgment, because I think we can all say we are our toughest critics, right? When we look in the mirror, we look in the mirror every day. When we look in the mirror, like, I could do a little better. I could lose 5 pounds over here. I should have worked out a little bit longer yesterday. Whatever it is, we're very, very critical of ourselves. And someone comes up and says, oh man, you look great. Okay. And then you say, well, I was looking in the mirror this morning and I really, really don't look great. I could do better. And it's that self-criticism.
Right.
So when we look at ourselves, I know so many people that I've talked to are looking for outside. We're always looking outside of ourselves for that emancipation. Somebody to say, declare, bang, you are not obligated to do those things anymore. Bang, you don't have to do those anymore. Well, who wrote the rules? Well, when I was 8 years old, I was told. And I've been living.
Yeah, but who accepted that rule?
Exactly. That I accepted that rule when I was 8 because my parents, who knew better, and when I was 8 years old, they knew everything.
Yeah.
When I was 18 years old, they didn't know a thing.
That's right.
When I was 28 years old, my parents were very smart.
Yeah.
So it all depends on where you hear it and at what age and how accepting we are of that source of where it's coming from. And when we talk about,
I want to go back to your discussion about judgment here for a minute, because
okay,
what I believe, and many people will think I'm crazy here, I think an awareness of judgment is a powerful pathway to liberation. And I'll tell you why. The moment I notice myself making a judgment about somebody else, their behavior, the way they dress, anything, even if my judgment is more in the form of a question, why did that person do that? Well, that's a judgment, really. That's what it is. If I can bring myself to be honest enough about it and say, I just judged that person for X. Now I'm going to flip it back and I'm going to say, so what is it about me? Where is that part of me that has X that I don't want to look at? Where's that part of me that is arrogant, self-righteous? When does that show up? And what happens when it does? The fact that I am able to judge another person is actually a blessing in disguise, because it means, remember in the Bible it says, judge not lest ye be judged. Well, that is exactly what it means. The moment I judge someone else, I am really judging some aspect of myself that I am choosing not to look at. So my awareness of that characteristic, the quality or whatever in the other person, is an opportunity for me to look for that quality in myself. And if it's something that I don't like so much, to find a way to heal it. What happens with healing? Healing is a step towards wholeness. That's what it is. What's wholeness? Wholeness is ultimate liberation, is it not? This is why I teach people about projection. Projection is a powerful, powerful gift that most often we just say, no, it's all projection. I'm just putting it out there because I don't want to look at it. Well, we don't want to look at it because it hurts. And it hurts because it's a wound. Well, what do you do with a wound? You heal it. That is my recommendation. When you're finding judgment, look inside and say, what is it about myself that I'm judging harshly right now? And give yourself permission to forgive yourself, first of all, for judging, and secondly, for having whatever the flaw is that you thought you had in the first place.
Nicely put. What I have started seeing and viewing life through is, and we've talked about this, and it's come up a number of times, is curiosity. Being curious instead of being judgmental. And that's what replaced the judge, was curious. Why do they feel that way? Why did they do that? So that I could have a deeper understanding. And I started asking the questions, not in a, not to get too close to somebody, or not to question them, but to understand them. And being able to hold that space and being able to ask people, hey, I'm trying to understand, why did this happen? What is it? What is it? And people open up. And when people open up, they have the vulnerability. And when they show that part of themselves, for me, that is that sense of wholeness, that sense of I'm where I should be, that sense of this is the place that I need to be with everybody else, is because I always viewed vulnerability, by the way, as a bad thing. It was a weakness. When I was younger and in my armor and I'm riding the horse with the shield and the sword, and I had the castle walls all around for defending, people couldn't get close to me. And I wondered why I couldn't get close to anybody, because I had all of this armor on. And,
right.
and now I walk with that vulnerability, and I can walk into any situation, and it's the only armor I need when I walk in, because I don't feel threatened. I don't feel, anybody could talk about any emotion, and I don't feel less than. I am open to whatever they have. And that's been such a gift for me, because emotions used to be that box that I locked it, put it away, and didn't want to talk about ever.
Yeah.
And now it's all open. And someone could say to you, it used to be, well, you're this or you're that. And I'd get angry, and of course I'd have to defend myself. And then if somebody comes up to me and says, well, you're this or that, and I go, yeah, you're right, I probably am. To them, I am. Right?
Right.
When we
it's an amazing transition, isn't it?
It has been. It has been in that respect. I'm sorry it took so damn long, though.
No, stop apologizing. It took exactly the right amount of time. This is very, very important. And I know a lot of people do this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm wagging my finger at you here, because there is no need to apologize for taking the amount of time that you needed to get where you are now. And I'm saying that for myself as much as for you, Scott, and for everybody else, actually. But I wanted to just bring back to a point here that Ricky made on the, she said, we were talking about judgment and all that other kind of stuff. And she said, let's call it discernment. But then she says, that's a cop-out for my right to judge. And I want to highlight that, because discernment is often used as a way of just simply saying, well, that gives me the right to observe and distinguish things. But ultimately, if I make an opinion about something, or if I draw a conclusion about something, that opinion or conclusion is not the fact. It's not the truth. It is my perspective. A judgment is just a form of, if you like, opinion or conclusion or assessment, all those things. So I think people need to understand that discernment is just a polite way of encapsulating all of those words, because what does discernment mean? It means you're distinguishing one thing from another. Well, you have to have the power of judgment to be able to do that. So Let's call it what it is. I observe things, I make conclusions, and I draw judgments about it. There's nothing wrong with judgments. They can serve us in quite a great way. But when we use those judgments as a weapon on somebody else, that is when we become, in the words of the other people, judgmental, right? And it's that judgmental attitude that a lot of people find very unpleasant. They want to avoid. And so I just wanted to bring that clarity around because I think it's really, really important. Ricky also said, and this is for your benefit, Scott, armor tends to be very stiff and restrictive, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Very stiff.
I often wonder how those knights were ever able to get around.
Amazing that they could fight for hours in it.
Right.
So the discernment, the clarity, the presence, all of these words, I know we throw them out, but they take on very singular meaning to each of us. And to be able to have the ability to listen to other people and understand them, for me, has been the greatest gift that judgment coming off of me. I used to listen to be able to formulate how I was going to respond. And I had the response the whole time. And I'm waiting for them just to finish just so I could say my part. Because I have a damn good idea of what I want to say.
That's right.
But now I listen to understand.
Yeah.
And if I don't need to say anything, I let it be. And therein lies the difference from who I was. It's that not needing to be right, not needing to add on, and not needing to, just be a part of that conversation when it's not needed.
Yeah.
And judgment not having judgment there allows me to do that also. And I am free from having to, or feeling I have to fill the space, or have to add something that doesn't need to be added.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff. We've talked about liberation, independence, freedom, emancipation. We're getting close to the top of the hour here. So, Scott, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for a beautifully and wonderfully in-depth conversation. I just want to make sure that I give you a chance to say some powerful final words with everyone before I close us out.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. The don't know about powerful, but in this next few days leading up to the independence that we celebrate of this country, having the ability to grow, to learn, to teach, travel, freedom of movement, freedom of all of those rights that we have within this country and what everybody else strives for. Don't take them for granted. Show gratitude for those people who have given you the ability to live this life and live it to the fullest. And bless yourself more than anyone else, because there's only one you. Live it fully, live it authentically.
Beautiful.
Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Scott. I mean, it's been a great conversation, and I just really appreciate it. And I appreciate you. I'm glad that I have you as a friend in my life. And I just want to say to all of you who are watching the live or watching the recording, liberation, independence, freedom, and emancipation are not just abstract concepts. They are essential components of every spiritual journey. If you do the necessary inner work, they can guide you toward a deeper understanding of your true nature and your relationship with the divine, however that shows up for you. Together, these principles lead to a life of profound peace, joy, and fulfillment, grounded in the awareness of your eternal spiritual nature. I want to say thank you all for watching today's program. And remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at lifemasterytv.com. And finally, I invite you all to remember to practice my life mastery mantra every single day. It's 3 parts. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. I'll see you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.